He left her 3 years ago without a goodbye. The man she loved, the man the world feared. But on a storm-torn flight, fate put them face to face again. Her trembling voice cut through the silence. "Don't come near them, Adrian. They're your sons." And in that moment, his entire empire began to crumble. Before we begin, make sure to hit that subscribe button and support the channel. Your love keeps these stories alive. Now let's start. The runway shimmered with rain. Lightning veined across the clouds, white against the bruised purple sky, as the engines of Adrian Moretti's jet growled awake. Inside the cabin, silence lived like a heartbeat held too long. Adrian paused at the foot of the steps, one gloved hand tightening around his phone. A text from his underboss blinked on the screen. Another meeting, another threat. But the words blurred. 3 years of empire building, of blood, smoke, and silence had not quieted the single name that still haunted him: Evelyn. He drew a breath that tasted of metal and rain. The bodyguards kept their distance. Everyone did. They feared his temper, his precision, the way he could smile while ordering a man's disappearance. But none of them knew that beneath the tailored black suit beat a heart that once trembled for a woman who painted sunsets and spoke of freedom. He climbed aboard. Leather, whiskey, and aviation fuel wrapped the air. The lights were dim, golden, almost intimate. He had chosen this plane because it was quiet, because no one questioned who sat beside him. Yet tonight, fate had rewritten his script. Halfway down the aisle, movement caught his eye. A woman bending to adjust a child's seatbelt. Hair like spilled gold fell over her shoulder. The gesture was small, ordinary, but it froze him where he stood. No, it can't be. She looked up briefly, and time folded in on itself. Evelyn Grace, not a memory, not a ghost, real, alive. And beside her, 3 boys, identical, restless, blue-eyed. The same impossible blue that stared back at him from the mirror each morning. Adrian's breath hitched. The noise of the engines faded into the slow thunder of his pulse. He had faced death with steadier hands. Now every nerve betrayed him. The eldest child tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Mommy, is it going to rain inside the clouds?" Evelyn smiled softly, the same smile that used to undo him in seconds. "No, darling, we'll be above the rain." Her voice, still velvet, still capable of mercy, cut through him like glass. Adrian forced himself into motion, sliding into the shadowed seat across the aisle. His men lingered near the cockpit, oblivious. He poured himself a drink he didn't taste, eyes fixed on the woman who had once been his salvation and his ruin. She was thinner now, the fragility sharpened by strength. There were faint shadows under her eyes, but her poise was unbroken. If she noticed him, she gave no sign. He wondered if she had rehearsed this indifference, or if time had simply perfected it. The jet began to taxi. Adrian loosened his tie, his mind a battlefield of memory. The first night he met her, an art gala he'd attended only to bribe a politician. She had laughed at something he couldn't remember, and the sound had startled him more than gunfire ever had. He told himself she would be a temporary distraction. Instead, she had become oxygen. Then the betrayal. The letter he never sent. The grave he'd dug for his own heart when he vanished to protect her from the family's wrath. He took another drink. The liquid burned. His reflection in the window stared back. Empty, dangerous, lonely. Across the aisle, Evelyn leaned her head against the seat, eyes closed. For a fleeting second, the turbulence of takeoff tilted her toward him. Her scent, white jasmine, the same perfume, drifted across the narrow space. He caught it like a curse. "Sir?" The steward's voice jolted him. "Would you like me to close the partition?" Adrian's gaze flicked to Evelyn, then back. "No, leave it open." The plane lifted. Rain streaked past the windows, turning to silver threads. Evelyn's hand rested on the nearest child's shoulder. The gesture was protective, almost defiant. He saw it and knew. She had built a world without him and guarded it like a fortress. He should have looked away. Instead, he memorized every detail: the small birthmark at her wrist, the way her lips pressed together when she was holding back words. He remembered how those same lips had once whispered promises into the dark. The cabin lights dimmed further. The twins began to drift to sleep, heads lolling against each other. Only the eldest stayed awake, watching the storm beyond the glass. Adrian found himself staring at the boy, tracing the identical angle of jaw, the familiar way he clenched his tiny fist when nervous. Mine. The thought came unbidden, savage. He's mine. He set the glass down before his grip shattered it. From across the aisle, Evelyn's eyes opened. Blue met gray. 3 years of silence detonated in that single glance. Neither moved, neither spoke, but the air between them thickened, charged, as if the storm outside had entered the cabin. She looked away first, pulling the blanket higher around the children. Her fingers trembled just once. He saw it. He remembered how she used to reach for him in sleep, as if needing to know he was still there. Now she kept her hands locked around her son's instead. Adrian leaned back, forcing his expression into the practiced calm of a man who feared nothing. Inside, the chaos screamed. He had built empires to forget her. He would burn them to understand this moment. Minutes bled into silence. The pilot announced cruising altitude, his voice distant, irrelevant. Adrian turned the empty glass in his hand, the ice cracking softly, like the echo of everything they'd broken. He wanted to ask 1,000 questions. Had she mourned him? Did she hate him? Who had given her those children's names? But the words were knives, and he wasn't ready for the wounds they'd open. Instead, he whispered her name under his breath, too low for anyone to hear. Evelyn. Her spine stiffened. She had heard. Of course she had. She didn't turn. Her voice came steady, quiet, lethal. "Don't you dare come near them, Adrian." The ice in his glass melted to water. Outside, lightning struck again, flooding the cabin with white. In that flash, he saw everything he'd lost, and everything fate had just thrown back into his arms. Silence fell again after her words, a silence so sharp that even the hum of the engines seemed to retreat. Adrian stared at her profile, elegant, cold, unyielding, and knew that this was no coincidence. Fate didn't make mistakes that cruel. He wanted to speak, to say something ordinary that would pierce the ice between them, but his mouth refused to move. 3 years of command had trained him to measure every word, yet with her, every sentence felt too fragile, too human. He rose slowly, not toward her but to the small bar at the front of the cabin. The bodyguards exchanged wary glances. They'd never seen him rattled. He poured another drink just to keep his hands busy, watching amber swirl in crystal. Evelyn's reflection glimmered in the polished surface of the glass. She was pretending to read a children's story from her phone, her voice low, steady, protective. The boys listened, half asleep, trusting. That trust was a dagger straight through him. 3 years ago, he had promised her safety. 3 years ago, he had broken every piece of that promise. A whisper escaped before he could stop it. "They're beautiful." Evelyn froze. She didn't turn around. "They're none of your concern," she said, so softly it almost vanished beneath the hum of the engines. The words hit harder than a bullet. He set the glass down and returned to his seat. The rain outside had turned into sheets of silver against the window, streaking upward as the jet sliced through cloud. Adrian leaned his head back and closed his eyes, letting memory drag him under. He saw her again in sunlight, before the wars, before the betrayals, her laughter echoing against marble halls. She'd been painting the courtyard wall in secret, turning stone into color. He'd told her it was foolish, that beauty invited weakness. She'd smiled and said, "Then maybe weakness is the only part of you worth saving." He hadn't known how right she was. A tiny hand touched Evelyn's wrist. One of the twins stirred. "Mommy, can I have water?" She nodded and reached for the bottle. The movement brought her closer to Adrian's line of sight again. The simple domesticity of it, a mother and her children, felt more unreachable to him than all the power he owned. He spoke without thinking. "How old are they?" The question slipped out rough, like gravel. Her eyes met his, steady now, stripped of fear, but filled with contempt. "Old enough to live without a father." The sentence landed like a verdict. He deserved it. Every word. Outside, lightning flickered. The pilot's voice came through the intercom, calm but taut. "We may experience brief turbulence, ladies and gentlemen. Please fasten your seatbelts." Evelyn checked the belts on the boys, efficient, practiced. Adrian fastened his own, watching her hands, small, graceful, strong. The same hands that had once held his face when the world turned violent. The plane lurched. Oxygen masks trembled above them but didn't fall. One of the boys whimpered. Evelyn murmured comfort. Adrian clenched his fists. Protectiveness surged. Raw. Instinctive. He hated himself for wanting to cross the aisle, to shield them, to reclaim something that no longer belonged to him. The turbulence eased after a minute, leaving behind the muted roar of engines. Evelyn exhaled slowly and glanced at the sleeping children. Relief softened her face for a heartbeat. And he saw the woman he'd loved, hidden beneath all the anger. He couldn't stay silent any longer. "Evelyn," he said quietly. She didn't respond. "I never meant for—" "Don't." Her voice was sharper than any blade he'd carried. "You don't get to rewrite the past mid-flight, Adrian." He swallowed the rest of his apology. Maybe she was right. Maybe silence was the only punishment that fit. Minutes crawled. The cabin lights dimmed further as the crew prepared for night cruise. Beyond the windows, thunderclouds cracked open to reveal a field of stars, scattered like ash across black velvet. He stared at those stars and wondered if she had looked at the same sky when he vanished, wondered if she had cursed his name or whispered it. From the corner of his eye, he saw her head tilt back against the seat. For a moment, exhaustion replaced fury. She was asleep sitting up, the children draped over her like tiny anchors. A golden strand of hair slipped across her face. Without thinking, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the silver lighter she'd given him years ago, the one engraved with her initials. He flicked it open, shut, open again, the soft click filling the space between them. A sound broke the rhythm, a faint buzz from his phone. He glanced down at the message that had arrived without a sender's name. Target sighted. Orders? His heart slammed against his ribs. He looked across the aisle at Evelyn and the children. Every instinct he'd honed screamed at him to act calm, to conceal, to wait. But a deeper instinct, the one he thought he'd buried, surged up, violent and protective. He typed back quickly, "Stand down," then deleted it. If the message had reached his men, they already knew she was alive. Someone had followed him. Someone inside his own syndicate. Adrian slipped the phone into his jacket, forcing his expression blank. He'd lived among betrayal long enough to recognize its scent, and it was suddenly everywhere. He watched Evelyn sleep, her hand resting protectively over the nearest child's chest. If she knew the danger creeping toward her again, she would never forgive him a second time. He turned toward the window, the reflection of her face hovering beside his in the glass, light and shadow, past and present. He murmured to the dark, "I won't let them touch you again." The engines deepened their drone. A single bolt of lightning split the clouds ahead, illuminating the cabin in a ghost-white flash. For that brief moment, Adrian's reflection vanished, leaving only hers and the three small faces beneath her arm. When the light faded, the phone buzzed once more. No text, this time, just a new icon flashing red, a signal from his network, a warning. He looked up sharply. Outside the window, a second aircraft shadowed their altitude, barely visible against the storm. His pulse quickened. Fate hadn't just trapped them together at 30,000 feet. It had brought the past screaming back with them. He leaned forward, voice low, steel cold. "Evelyn," he said. She stirred, eyes opening, dazed. "What is it?" He didn't answer. He was already unfastening his seatbelt, scanning the sky. The intercom crackled again, the pilot's voice suddenly tense. "Mr. Moretti, we're being hailed by an unregistered craft. Instructions?" Adrian's reply was calm, deadly. "Ignore them. Keep climbing." Evelyn turned fully toward him now, confusion cutting through sleep. "Adrian, what's happening?" He met her gaze, the same electric blue he'd seen in 3 small faces. His words were barely a whisper. "History is catching up." Lightning flared again, and the plane shuddered violently as if the storm itself had hurt him. Evelyn's hand flew to her son's. The youngest woke and began to cry. Adrian stood between them and the window, jaw set, eyes locked on the shape of the approaching aircraft. And in that charged, electric moment, fear, love, and the weight of unfinished sins collided. Evelyn's trembling voice broke the silence. "Don't you dare come near them, Adrian." He turned toward her. And through the window behind her, a flash of light streaked closer from the storm-dark sky. Rain light spilled through the jet's oval windows, glinting off steel and glass. Evelyn's fingers tightened on the armrest until her knuckles whitened. The hum of the engines blurred into the pulse, hammering in her ears. 3 years had passed. Yet the sound of his voice had returned exactly as she remembered, low, commanding, impossible to ignore. "They're mine, aren't they?" The words echoed long after he spoke them. She didn't answer, couldn't. Her throat had closed around everything she'd sworn never to feel again. Evelyn. 3 years earlier. The memory hit her like pressure before a storm. Candlelight, marble, the scent of his cologne mixing with paint and turpentine from her studio. Adrian had come to her that night straight from a meeting. His jacket smelled of gunpowder and rain, his smile softening only for her. "Someday," he'd said, tracing a line of color on her canvas, "I'll walk away from all this." She had laughed, not believing him. "Men like you don't walk away. You conquer or you burn." He had kissed her temple. "Then I'll burn for you." And then he vanished. No message, no body. Only silence that swallowed her whole. Evelyn forced herself to breathe. She focused on the steady rhythm of her son's breaths, her boys, her reason for surviving. Across the aisle, Adrian's stare never left her. The years had carved something colder into him, his shoulders heavier, his expression unreadable, the faint scar at his jaw that hadn't been there before. He looked like power itself, and still, a small, unwanted part of her remembered how his arms had once felt like home. He'd killed men without hesitation. Yet right now, every second of her silence flayed him. He wanted to tell her everything, the threats, the betrayal, why disappearing had been the only way to keep her alive. But the words turned to dust behind his teeth. He studied the boys instead. One reached for a toy car, the wheels clicking softly. His heart stopped at the sight, his own family crest carved on the underside. Evelyn must have kept it, a relic from the empire he'd abandoned. He looked back at her. "I never meant—" Evelyn cut him off. "Don't. You don't get to mean anything anymore." Anger steadied her hands. She'd built her life on that anger. Moved cities, changed her name, learned to raise 3 children while hiding the truth of their bloodline. And now he was here, unraveling every hard-won layer of peace with a single look. She wanted to shout, to demand why he'd left, but the boys stirred. The eldest blinked awake, studying the stranger across the aisle with curious blue eyes. "Mom?" he whispered. "Why does that man look at you like that?" Her pulse stumbled. "Sleep, darling." But the child didn't. He kept staring at Adrian, head tilted, confusion giving way to something eerie, instinctive, recognition. He felt the boy's gaze like a spotlight. It was the same expression Adrian had worn at that age, suspicious, solemn. The resemblance was undeniable. He wanted to reach out, to claim what was his, but Evelyn's glare stopped him cold. There was fear in her eyes, but not for herself, for them. "I'm not the enemy," he murmured. She gave a quiet, humorless laugh. "Every man who says that usually is." The plane hit a pocket of air. The lights flickered. One of the twins whimpered, pressing close to her. Adrian's chest tightened. He had lived through wars, yet the sight of her comforting their sons broke him more than any bullet could. She remembered the morning she discovered she was pregnant. Standing in the gallery, hands trembling over a test she couldn't bring herself to believe. He'd been gone for weeks then. Rumors had said he was dead. She'd cried until there were no tears left, then made a choice. She would raise their children free of his world. Now that world was staring her down again, flesh and blood, breathing the same air. She turned to the window, willing the clouds to swallow them. He watched the muscles in her jaw tighten. He knew that look. It meant she was fighting tears. Evelyn never cried in front of anyone. He used to love that defiance. He lowered his voice. "You kept them hidden from me. You left them fatherless. That was the only way to keep you alive." Her head snapped toward him, fury blazing through the controlled calm. "You call that love? Disappearing into your shadows and letting me think you were dead?" He had no answer that wouldn't sound like a lie. The eldest boy, still half awake, broke the silence. His small voice was calm, curious, almost accusing. "Mama, why does that man have my eyes?" Time froze. Evelyn felt the question pierce her chest like shrapnel. The twins stirred. Adrian went utterly still. Every secret she had buried beneath new names and new cities was unraveling right there, in a child's innocent whisper. Adrian's hand twitched against his knee, as if reaching across the aisle could somehow bridge 3 years of absence. The look he gave her wasn't the cold stare of a mafia boss. It was the raw, unguarded expression of a man realizing what he'd lost. She wanted to scream, to deny everything, to protect her sons from the storm she saw rising behind his eyes. But words failed. The truth had already been spoken by the one voice she could never silence. The boy turned toward Adrian again, waiting for an answer he didn't understand. Adrian leaned forward, his tone gentle, almost broken. "Because, little man—" He stopped himself, throat locking on the rest. Evelyn's whisper cut through the air like a blade. "Don't. You don't get to speak to them." Lightning flickered outside, throwing fractured light across the cabin. The moment held, sharp as glass. Adrian sat back slowly, every muscle in his body coiled. He knew now there was no undoing this. The truth was out, and the danger it carried was real. Somewhere in the world below, enemies would be listening for any sign of Evelyn Grace, the ghost wife of the Moretti heir. He glanced toward the cockpit, mind already calculating, protecting, planning. Evelyn gathered the boys closer, heart pounding. The plane leveled out, calm, returning like the eye of a storm. Yet both of them knew peace was a lie. The eldest boy yawned, curling against his mother's arm. Evelyn stroked his hair, forcing a calm smile. Then she looked up and saw Adrian's phone glowing faintly in his hand. A single message pulsed on the screen. "Target confirmed. Proceed when ready." Her breath caught. Adrian saw her expression change, followed her gaze to the phone, and his blood ran cold. Before either could speak, the cockpit door swung open and a crewman whispered something that drained the color from Adrian's face. He rose abruptly. "Get them buckled," he ordered. Evelyn's voice shook. "What's happening?" His eyes, dark and furious, met hers. "Someone knows you're alive." The jet banked sharply toward the storm. The first jolt hit like a gunshot. The cabin lurched, glasses shattered. A cry rose somewhere near the back. Evelyn's breath caught as gravity shifted. The world outside the windows turned into a blur of lightning and rain. Adrian was on his feet before thought could form, moving with the precision of someone who had lived too long in chaos. "Sit down, seatbelts, now." His voice, cold and commanding, sliced through the panic. Evelyn dragged the boys close, arms forming a shield around them. The eldest clutched her sleeve, eyes wide. "Mommy." "It's all right," she whispered, even though it wasn't. The plane dropped again, a stomach-turning fall. Masks dropped from the ceiling like ghosts. Oxygen hissed, the lights flickered, dimmed, flared. Adrian crossed the aisle, bracing himself against the seats, and reached them. The youngest twin was crying now, soundless tears rolling down. Evelyn tried to calm him, but her hands shook. Then his hand covered hers, firm, steady. "Hold on to me," he ordered. She wanted to push him away, but the plane rolled violently, throwing her against him. His arm caught her waist, pulling her tight against the solid wall of his body. For a heartbeat, fear and memory collided. The scent of him, the strength she'd once trusted without question. "Keep your heads down," he said, shielding them with his body. The engines roared like beasts fighting the wind. It lasted minutes, maybe seconds. Time lost all shape. When the shaking eased, the pilot's voice broke through the static. "Apologies, passengers. Severe turbulence. We're stabilizing now." The cabin fell into a bruised silence. People breathed again. Sobs turned into whispers. The hum of the engine steadied, but inside Evelyn everything still spun. Adrian straightened slowly, his hand still on her shoulder. She felt the tremor in his palm, proof that even he wasn't immune to fear. She met his eyes. For the first time since his reappearance, the mask cracked. Beneath it was exhaustion, and something like remorse. "Why now?" she asked, voice low, almost drowned by the engines. "Why come back?" His gaze dropped to the children, then back to her. "Because you were never supposed to be found. Because the man hunting you was my own blood. Because I left to save you." He wanted to say it all, but words felt like landmines, so he said nothing. Evelyn turned away, biting down on the sob that threatened. "You disappear for 3 years, and suddenly you're the hero in a storm? Don't pretend this is protection, Adrian. It's guilt." He exhaled slowly. "You think I wanted this life? You chose it. You always did." Her tone was quiet, but every syllable struck hard. He sat opposite her, elbows on his knees, head bowed. For the first time in years, he looked human. Not the untouchable Moretti heir, but a man undone by his own choices. Outside, the storm thinned into gray mist. The world looked deceptively calm. Evelyn adjusted the blanket around the boys. "They don't even know your name," she said, softer now. "Maybe that's mercy," he murmured. That made her look at him again. "Mercy? You think abandoning your family was mercy?" He met her stare. "If I'd stayed, they'd be orphans." The truth in his voice frightened her more than the turbulence had. She searched his face, looking for lies, for cracks, for something she could hate completely. But there it was, regret, carved deep into him. For a heartbeat, silence connected them, raw and painful. Evelyn looked away first. "You don't get to justify betrayal by calling it sacrifice." The words hung between them, heavy as the rain. Adrian leaned back, jaw tight. He could command an army, but not her forgiveness. The eldest boy stirred, half asleep. Evelyn hushed him with a touch, her anger fading into tiredness. She felt Adrian's eyes still on her, the same eyes that had once promised forever and delivered absence instead. He spoke finally, almost to himself. "You survived me." She didn't answer. He wasn't wrong. She had survived. And that survival had cost her softness, sleep, trust. The cabin lights steadied. The pilot announced clear skies ahead, but Evelyn knew storms never ended that neatly, not with Adrian Moretti sitting across from her. Her thoughts raced. If he'd come back, it meant danger. His world didn't allow coincidence. Maybe he hadn't found her by accident. Maybe someone else had found him. Adrian felt the same dread twisting inside him. That anonymous message before takeoff. Target confirmed. He deleted it, but its shadow lingered. He slipped his phone from his jacket, shielding the screen from view. No new messages. But in his line of work, silence was never safety. It was the quiet before impact. He looked at Evelyn again. "We need to talk when we land." "We won't," she said flatly. "We're done talking." He almost smiled, not from amusement but from recognition. That defiance was the same reason he'd fallen in love with her. The eldest boy shifted, mumbling in his sleep. The word that escaped his lips froze them both. Papa. Evelyn's breath hitched. She'd never taught them that word. Adrian's head snapped up, disbelief flickering into something darker. Hope mixed with pain. She turned her face toward the window. He dreams. That's all. But she knew it wasn't true. Children sense truths adults tried to bury. The plane dipped slightly as the pilot adjusted altitude. Adrian's phone vibrated again, faint, persistent. He glanced down. No number. Just text. Target located. Evelyn Grace. Orders? His heart went still. He looked up. Evelyn was watching him, suspicion dawning in her eyes. He turned the phone face down, but it was too late. "What was that?" she asked quietly. "Nothing that concerns you." "Everything concerning you concerns me," she said, and there was steel in her voice. He hesitated. The old instinct to lie fighting with the urge to protect. "Someone found us," he said finally. Her face drained of color. "Us?" "Yes." He stood, scanning the aisle, his tone sharp. "Stay here, don't move." "Adrian!" The plane jolted again, gentler this time, but enough to make the twins stir. Adrian steadied himself against the seatback. He was already calculating. Landing options, safe routes, loyalty gaps in his crew. Evelyn reached for his sleeve, voice trembling. "Who found us?" He looked down at her, and for the first time, fear flickered in his eyes. "The people I ran from." Her hand fell away. The hum of the engines filled the silence between them, steady but menacing, like the ticking of a clock. He checked his phone once more. The message blinked again, same words, only now accompanied by coordinates. Whoever was watching them knew exactly where they were. A sharp beep sounded from the cockpit, followed by the pilot's strained voice. "Mr. Moretti, we're being redirected. Air traffic control says emergency route change. Coordinates just came through." Adrian's blood turned to ice. He hadn't authorized any redirection. He looked at Evelyn, then at the sleeping boys. "Buckle them, now." "Adrian, what's going on?" He didn't answer. His phone vibrated one last time. New coordinates received. Extraction team en route. The message wasn't from his men. The plane banked sharply toward the darkness. The jet sliced through the clouds like a blade through silk. Below, the world stretched out in shadows and silver, distant and indifferent. Inside, the silence was suffocating. Evelyn sat motionless, the boys asleep beside her, their small hands clutching the edge of the blanket. Her mind replayed every word, every glance, every tremor in Adrian's voice. Something was wrong, something he wasn't saying. From the cockpit, muted voices bled into the cabin. She caught fragments, coordinates, unknown transmission, hold pattern, and then his voice, deep, clipped, laced with control and barely concealed fear. "Keep flying. No one lands this plane unless I say so." The way he said it made her stomach twist. The man who had once whispered love against her skin was gone. In his place stood the cold tactician, the Mafia boss she had tried to forget. Evelyn rose slowly, careful not to wake the children, and moved closer. The low light painted his profile in sharp lines, jaw tight, shoulders rigid, every inch the predator he'd been trained to be. She listened from the doorway. "Yeah, they found her name," Adrian said quietly into his phone. "I told you to wipe every record." A pause. The voice on the other end was indistinct, male, nervous. Adrian's tone hardened. "If they know she's alive, they'll come for her. You understand what that means." Evelyn's heart thudded painfully. "They'll come for her." He ended the call, knuckles white around the phone. When he turned, she was already there. "You're in danger, Eve," he said softly, voice strained but steady. "You and the boys." She folded her arms, masking the tremor in her hands. "From who?" He hesitated. "From you, Adrian?" It was meant to sting, and it did. He flinched, just barely. That was answer enough. She gave a bitter laugh. "You're unbelievable. You disappear for 3 years, reappear with enemies behind you, and expect me to believe this is protection?" His eyes, cold as winter, met hers. "You don't have to believe it. You just have to stay alive." Evelyn shook her head. "You promised me forever once. I promised to keep you safe. That's not the same thing." "No," he admitted, voice breaking slightly. "It isn't." The silence stretched, thick and dangerous. Outside, lightning flared across the horizon, illuminating the tension between them like a camera flash capturing 2 ghosts. Evelyn turned away first. She didn't trust herself to speak. Her reflection in the window looked older than she remembered. Haunted, hardened. 3 years of survival had stolen her softness. Behind her, Adrian spoke again, low and almost regretful. "You were never supposed to see me again." She let out a hollow laugh. "Trust me, that makes 2 of us." He took a slow step forward. "Evelyn." The way he said her name, careful, reverent, pulled at something buried deep. She hated that it still affected her. "Stop," she said sharply. "Don't say my name like that, not after everything." His jaw clenched. "You think I wanted to disappear? That I left because I stopped loving you? Didn't you?" He looked at her for a long moment, then away. The silence that followed was an answer she didn't want. Flashback, 3 years earlier. Their wedding night was quiet, almost sacred. The city slept beneath them as they stood on the balcony of his villa overlooking the river. She remembered the way his hands trembled when he slid the ring onto her finger, like even then he feared he might lose her. "I will protect you," he'd whispered, pressing his forehead to hers. "From the world, from my enemies, even from myself." She had smiled through tears. "You don't need to protect me from you." But he'd only held her tighter. That night, the stars had looked close enough to touch. She never imagined that within months, those same hands would vanish, leaving her with nothing but questions and unborn children. Present, the hum of the engines filled the cabin again. Evelyn blinked, pulling herself out of memory. Adrian was standing near the minibar, pouring water into a glass. The tremor in his hand was subtle, but there. He wasn't as composed as he wanted her to think. "Who are they?" she asked finally. "The ones you're running from?" He didn't answer immediately. "People who think you're leverage." "For what?" "For me." Her stomach dropped. "So that's it. I'm just a weapon to use against the great Adrian Moretti." His expression darkened. "Don't twist this, Eve. They don't care about you. They care about hurting me." "That's the same thing," she said quietly. He opened his mouth to reply, but stopped. The truth in her words was a wound he couldn't defend. She moved past him, brushing against his shoulder. The contact was electric, soft, fleeting, wrong. It left him motionless, watching her walk away. She reached the coat draped over the back of his seat. He had tossed it carelessly when the turbulence ended. Now curiosity and dread pushed her fingers toward the inner pocket. Inside, her hand found cold metal. Her breath caught. She drew it out slowly, a gun black and silent. Not surprising for a man like him, but the weight of it still chilled her. Then, as she set it down, something else glinted in the lining. A silver chain. A locket. Evelyn froze. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside, beneath a thin layer of dust, was her photograph, taken years ago, the night he'd proposed. Her smile was bright, unguarded. The reflection of his hand could be seen faintly in the corner of the frame. He'd kept it, all this time. Footsteps approached behind her. Looking for something? Adrian's voice was calm, too calm. Evelyn turned, the locket trembling in her grip. "Why do you still have this?" He met her eyes. "Because I never stopped needing to remember why I left." The sincerity in his tone startled her. For a moment, the air between them softened. Then the intercom crackled. "Mr. Moretti," the pilot said nervously, We're being followed." Adrian's gaze snapped to the window. In the distance, a shadow moved against the clouds, small, fast, closing in. Evelyn's pulse spiked. "What is that?" He didn't answer. He just took the gun from her hands and checked the chamber. "Get the boys," he said, voice dropping to steel. "Adrian!" Now. Evelyn rushed to the children as Adrian crossed to the cockpit. Through the window, the shadow grew larger, too precise, too deliberate. A red light blinked on the dashboard. The pilot's voice cracked. "Sir, that aircraft's locking onto us." Evelyn turned toward Adrian, panic rising. "What does that mean?" He looked back at her, eyes like ice, the locket still glinting in his palm. "It means," he said grimly, "they didn't come to scare us. They came to finish what they started." Outside, a flash of light split the sky. The night bled red and silver over the runway. Rain streaked the windows as the jet's wheels screeched against the tarmac. Evelyn's arms tightened around her son's. The air smelled of fuel and fear. Adrian was already moving before the plane came to a full stop. His instincts were faster than thought, the rhythm of a man who'd survived too many ambushes. "Stay close," he said, voice sharp but low. Through the narrow window, she saw them, black SUVs circling like predators. Doors opened. Figures stepped out, armed, faces hidden by masks and rain. The engines hadn't even cooled when the first shot cracked the night. Glass exploded. Someone screamed. Evelyn ducked, covering the boys. Adrian shoved open the cabin door, barking orders to his men. "2 left flank, 1 on the cockpit. Move!" Bullets tore through the fuselage. He grabbed Evelyn's wrist and pulled her toward the rear exit. She stumbled, clutching one of the twins, her heart slamming against her ribs. "Adrian! Run!" Outside, chaos reigned. Men in black exchanged fire, muzzle flashes lighting the storm. Adrian's guards, loyal remnants of his fallen empire, formed a living wall around them. A car screeched up, doors flung open. "Get in!" someone shouted. Adrian pushed Evelyn and the children inside first, then dove in after them. The door slammed shut just as another shot shattered the rear window. The driver hit the gas. Tires screamed. The SUV fishtailed on wet asphalt, then sped into the darkness beyond the runway lights. Evelyn turned, breathless. "Who are they?" Adrian reloaded his pistol, eyes fixed ahead. "People who don't believe in ghosts." The words sent a chill down her spine. Behind them, the burning wreckage of their jet faded into the rain. They drove for hours through mountain roads that twisted like veins through stone. The children slept in her lap, exhaustion claiming them. Evelyn stared out at the blur of dark trees, her mind racing faster than the car. Adrian sat beside her, silent, gun still resting on his thigh. His face was carved in shadows, unreadable but not untouched. Every so often she caught him glancing at the rearview mirror, checking for headlights that weren't there. "Where are you taking us?" she asked finally. "Somewhere no one remembers exists." "That's not an answer. It's the only one you'll get until we're safe." The word safe sounded foreign coming from him. She turned her gaze back to the rain-streaked window. Safe. She'd once believed that word when he said it, years ago. Now it felt like another lie carved into her past. Hours later, the SUV slowed, gravel crunching under the tires. The headlights swept across a high iron gate covered in ivy. Beyond it, a villa loomed. Pale stone, half hidden by forest, the kind of place secrets go to die. The gate opened automatically. Adrian's men stepped out of the shadows, weapons drawn but faces familiar to him. They parked inside. The rain had eased, but the air was thick, heavy with unspoken things. Evelyn stepped out, clutching one of the twins. "Where are we?" Adrian scanned the perimeter before answering. "A safe house. My father built it before I was born. No one outside my inner circle knows it's here." She met his gaze, voice low. "And someone in your inner circle betrayed you, didn't they?" His silence was confirmation enough. He motioned for the men to secure the property, then turned to her. "Get them inside. There's food, warmth. You'll be safe here for the night." "You keep saying that," she muttered. "And yet, everywhere you go, people die." He didn't reply. The truth stung too deeply for words. Inside, the villa felt untouched by time. Grand hallways, dusted furniture, and the faint scent of cedar and memory. Evelyn laid the children in a guest room, kissed their foreheads, and stood there for a long while, watching them sleep. Only when she closed the door did the walls seem to breathe. The silence pressed in. She found him downstairs in the study. He was leaning against the fireplace, sleeves rolled up, gun on the table beside him. The glow from the flames caught the edge of his features. The same man who'd once promised her eternity. "You should rest," he said without looking up. She crossed her arms. "I don't sleep well around you anymore." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "That makes two of us." For a moment, the crackle of fire filled the space between them. Then she asked, quietly but firmly, "Tell me the truth, Adrian. Why did you leave?" He looked up, eyes darker than the night outside. "Because someone inside my own syndicate sold us out. They wanted me dead, but they wanted you more." Her breath caught. "Me? They thought killing you would break me. They weren't wrong." He took a step closer. "I had two choices. Watch you die or disappear and let them think I already had." She shook her head, tears threatening. "You think leaving me to mourn you was mercy?" "It was the only way I knew to keep you alive." Her voice cracked. "You didn't save me, Adrian. You destroyed me." The words landed like bullets. He didn't flinch this time. He took the hit as if he deserved it. "I know," he said softly, "and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to undo it." She turned away, but he stepped closer. "Evelyn, listen." "No." Her voice trembled. "You listen. You made me live 3 years in fear. I raised your sons in hiding, thinking you were dead. Every sound outside my door felt like the past coming to finish what you started." He closed his eyes. "If I could change it, you can't." The fire popped, sending a spray of embers upward. For a moment, the only sound was her breathing, ragged, furious, broken. She pressed a hand to her face, trying to stop the tears. "You don't get to ask forgiveness just because you regret the consequences." He watched her, jaw tight, eyes full of pain he couldn't name. "I don't want forgiveness," he said finally. "I want to make sure you live long enough to hate me properly." It was dark humor, but true. Evelyn shook her head, half laugh, half sob. "You're impossible. And you're the only thing that's ever made me human." The confession slipped out like a wound reopening. She turned sharply, but before she could respond, a flicker of movement caught her eye outside the window. A shadow slicing through moonlight. Adrian noticed it too. His body went still, hand reaching for the gun on the table. "Stay here," he whispered. Evelyn's heart jumped. "What is it?" He moved toward the door, silent as the predator he'd once been. "Someone's watching." She followed to the edge of the hall, pulse racing. Outside, the forest was a wall of black. The wind rustled the trees, but something else moved between them, deliberate, patient. Adrian scanned the darkness, gun raised, nothing but rain and silence. Then a faint glint, glass catching moonlight. A scope. Far beyond the gate, hidden in the trees, a figure crouched in the mud. The sniper's voice was low, precise, almost reverent. The boss's ghost has returned. He adjusted the scope, the crosshair settling on Adrian's chest through the villa window. Prepare the trap. No mistakes this time. The line went dead. Inside, Evelyn reached for Adrian's arm, sensing the shift before he spoke. His expression had turned to stone. "Get the boys," he murmured. "Now." Outside, lightning split the sky again, and this time it wasn't thunder that followed. The storm had passed, but the villa didn't breathe easier. Silence hung in its halls, heavy as fog, thick with unspoken words. Every clock tick sounded like a warning. Adrian stood by the window, cigarette between his fingers, staring out into the endless black beyond the tree line. Smoke curled upward, ghost-like, tracing the shape of his guilt against the glass. He hadn't slept. He rarely did anymore. Somewhere down the hall, Evelyn whispered lullabies, soft, trembling notes meant to comfort the boys. He could hear her voice through the walls, like an echo from another life. He closed his eyes for a moment. That voice used to mean home. Now it only reminded him of everything he'd burned to the ground. When Evelyn finally stepped into the room, her hair was loose, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion and worry. The lamplight caught the gold in her hair, but it didn't soften her expression. "They're asleep," she said quietly. Adrian didn't turn. "Good." "Good?" Her tone cut sharper than she meant it to. They had to fall asleep clutching each other because they were afraid. Because of you. He took a slow drag, exhaled smoke toward the open window. "Fear keeps people alive." Her laugh was bitter, hollow. "Is that what you tell yourself at night?" He turned then, the flicker of fire in his eyes. "It's what's kept you alive for 3 years." Evelyn stepped closer, crossing her arms as if to keep herself from shaking. "Alive isn't the same as living, Adrian. You took that from me." He said nothing. He just watched her. The rise and fall of her breath, the anger trembling beneath her grief. "They deserve better than this," she said finally, quieter this time. "I know." His voice cracked just slightly, barely audible. "Then let us go." The words sliced the air between them. He froze, cigarette hovering at his lips. "I can't." "Can't or won't?" He looked at her then. Really looked. And for the first time, she saw something raw behind that cold control. "The people hunting you. They're my blood." The silence that followed was suffocating. She blinked, disbelief tightening her throat. "What?" "My family," he said, voice low, rough. "The ones who took my throne when I disappeared. They know about you now, about the boys. Your leverage." Evelyn's chest ached as the truth hit. It wasn't just revenge. It was legacy, power, bloodline. "You built this empire," she whispered, "and now it's devouring your own children." His jaw tightened. "That's why I can't let you go. If they find you, they'll use them to break me, and I'll burn the world before I let that happen." Hours passed in fragments. The villa seemed to breathe around them. Creaking floors, whispering wind, ghosts of old promises that refused to die. In the kitchen, Evelyn stood by the counter, hands wrapped around a mug gone cold. Adrian was in the next room, murmuring to his men on the radio, giving orders, tightening security. Every word sounded like distance. When he returned, the tension followed him like smoke. "You've turned this place into a prison," she said. He stopped in the doorway. "If it keeps you alive, then yes." "You really think that's what I want? To live behind locked doors, pretending this is safety?" He didn't answer. Instead, he walked closer. the heat of him cutting through the cold space between them. "Evelyn," he said softly, "I lost you once. I'm not losing you again." She swallowed hard. "You didn't lose me, Adrian. You let me go." He reached out, slow, almost hesitant, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from her face. The touch sent a shiver through her she hated herself for feeling. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't what?" "Don't confuse regret with love." The words hit him harder than any bullet could. He stepped back, the tension between them snapping like a live wire. "You think I don't know the difference?" She met his gaze, her voice steady even as her heart raced. "I think you forgot how to tell." The hours after midnight were long and brittle. He sat in the study staring at old maps, old betrayals. She lay awake in the guest room, watching moonlight creep across the floorboards. Every sound in the villa made her flinch: the creak of wood, the sigh of the wind, the weight of his footsteps outside her door. She couldn't decide what terrified her more: the danger beyond the walls or the man guarding them. In another room, one of the twins stirred in his sleep, murmuring softly, "Mama." Evelyn rose, kissed each boy's forehead, tucking them in again. For a brief, fragile moment, peace existed. Then thunder rolled in the distance, not the kind that comes from storms, but from engines, faint and far. Adrian heard it too, and he was standing at the window again when she found him there, his expression unreadable, his posture taut. "What is it?" she asked. He didn't answer immediately. "A sound I've been waiting for." Her pulse quickened. "Are they coming?" He turned his head slightly, just enough for her to see the faint, grim smile on his lips. They never stopped. Later, exhaustion became its own kind of mercy. Evelyn tucked the boys in again, this time staying with them until their breathing softened, until sleep claimed them. She lingered by the bed, tracing her fingers through their hair. Golden curls against white pillows. She thought of how small they looked, how much of him they carried in their faces. It terrified her. Behind her, the door creaked open. Adrian leaned against the frame, no cigarette this time. Only a look she couldn't decipher. "Everything's in place," he said quietly. "My men are posted at every exit." She nodded without looking at him. "Good. Maybe we'll live long enough for them to see daylight again." He hesitated. "You don't trust me." "Would you?" His silence was answer enough. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "If anything happens—" "Nothing's going to happen," she cut in sharply. "Not tonight." He stared at her, almost wanting to believe it, but in his gut, he knew peace wasn't theirs to keep. Sometime before dawn, she finally drifted into uneasy sleep. The villa was still. The world seemed to hold its breath. Adrian patrolled the halls one last time, checking each lock, each window. The twins' room was quiet, small chests rising and falling beneath blankets. Evelyn was curled in the chair beside them, one hand resting protectively near her son's. For the first time in years, he felt something almost like peace, almost. He turned away. The night surrendered to gray light creeping through the curtains. Birds began to stir. The scent of rain lingered. He poured himself a drink, leaned against the counter, and tried to remember what it felt like to believe in morning. A sound shattered the fragile calm. A scream, sharp, breaking, maternal. Adrian dropped the glass. It hit the floor, splintering into silence. He ran down the hall, heart slamming, gun drawn. The door to the boys' room swung open. The beds were empty. The window, wide open, curtains fluttering in the cold dawn breeze. Evelyn stood frozen, one hand to her mouth, eyes wide with horror. Adrian's voice was a growl, guttural, raw. "They found us." Outside, in the distance, a single black car disappeared down the fog-covered road, tail lights blinking like blood against the morning mist. The scream split the morning like glass breaking. Evelyn's voice tore through the halls of the villa, raw, desperate. "Adrian!" He was already moving, gun drawn, heart pounding in his throat. His men flooded the corridor, shouting orders. "The boys!" she cried, stumbling toward the open window. The curtains whipped in the cold wind. Outside, muddy footprints, small and uneven, vanishing into the fog beyond the garden. Panic hit Adrian harder than any bullet ever had. His mind fractured into instincts. Search? Hunt? Kill? "Lock the perimeter," he barked. "No one leaves until we find them." But even as he gave the command, he knew the enemy was gone. They had moved fast, precise, professional. Someone had betrayed him again. Minutes bled into hours. The woods swallowed sound, swallowed hope. Adrian's men fanned out through the trees, flashlights slicing through mist. Evelyn followed despite his protests, her face pale, her steps unsteady but unrelenting. "Stay behind me," he warned. "Don't tell me to stay behind," she snapped. "They're my children, Adrian, our children." The way she said it, our, cracked something deep inside him. Branches whipped her face as they pushed deeper into the forest. Rain dripped from the canopy, the world painted in grays and shadows. Every echo sounded like a cry. "Over here!" one of the men shouted. Adrian ran toward the voice. The ground sloped downward into a ravine. There, half buried in mud, lay a small toy car. Red paint chipped, one wheel missing. He knelt, brushing it clean. Evelyn gasped. "That's—" He turned it over. Etched crudely into the metal bottom was a crest, a dagger wrapped in a serpent. His family's mark, a message. His fingers tightened around the toy until his knuckles went white. He whispered the name like a curse. "Luca." Evelyn froze. "Your brother?" Adrian's jaw flexed. "Half-brother. He wasn't supposed to survive what I left him." Her eyes widened. "What do you mean?" He looked at her then, eyes darker than the storm overhead. "He tried to kill you 3 years ago. I buried him alive for it." The wind carried the sound of her gasp away. "So he's back," she whispered. "And now he's coming for the only thing that matters to you." He stood, pocketing the toy. "No, he's coming for the only thing that ever made me weak." Their eyes met, pain and rage bleeding together. "Then we go after him," she said. He shook his head. "You don't know what you're asking." "I don't care." Her voice trembled, but her resolve didn't. "If you're going to war for them, I'm not staying behind." For a moment, neither spoke. Then he nodded once. "Gear up, we leave in 10. The safe house turned into an armory. Adrian's men rearmed, loading magazines, checking rifles, engines roaring outside. Evelyn moved among them, silent, focused. She found a pistol on the table, checked the chamber the way he'd taught her years ago, and tucked it into her belt. Adrian watched her from across the room. "You remember how to shoot?" She gave him a hard look. "You made sure I never forgot." He allowed himself one breath, pride mixed with dread. "Stay close to me out there. Don't give me orders. Just find them." Night fell by the time they reached the outskirts of the city. The GPS tracked faint heat signatures from the twins' trackers, chips Adrian had embedded in their shoes long ago, back when paranoia was still love disguised as protection. The signal pulsed weakly on the screen. He zoomed in, an abandoned factory near the river, perfect ground for a trap. Evelyn leaned closer, whispering, "He's waiting for you." "I'm counting on it." His tone was flat, lethal. The man she'd once known, the lover, the husband, had vanished. In his place stood the Mafia boss the world feared, precise, emotionless, death incarnate. They reached the factory close to midnight. Rain fell in thin silver threads, streaking the cracked windows. Adrian's convoy stopped 100 meters away. He motioned his men to fan out silently. He and Evelyn approached the side entrance, guns drawn. Inside, the air smelled of rust, oil, and decay. Water dripped from the ceiling, echoing through the hollow space. Evelyn's pulse thudded in her ears. "You think they're alive?" He looked at her, not with hope, but with certainty. They're ours. They're alive. She wanted to believe him. They moved in sync like muscle memory. Corners, stairwells, silent signals. His hand brushed hers once, instinctive grounding, before pulling away. Somewhere above, footsteps. Adrian raised 2 fingers. His men advanced. Gunfire erupted. The factory exploded into chaos. Muzzle flashes cutting through dark, bullets ricocheting off metal beams. Evelyn ducked behind a pillar, adrenaline surging. She returned fire, her hand steady despite the terror clawing inside her. Adrian moved through the storm like a shadow, each shot precise, efficient. One by one, bodies fell. Men loyal to Luca, faces twisted in fear at the sight of their living ghost. When silence returned, the smell of gunpowder lingered. Evelyn stepped over a fallen man, her voice shaking. "How many of them are there?" "Too many," Adrian muttered, "and this isn't their full force." She frowned. "What do you mean?" He stared at the upper floor. A faint light flickered there. "It means this was just a distraction." Then they heard it, the faint cry of a child. Evelyn's heart stopped. "That's them." She started toward the stairs, but Adrian grabbed her wrist. "Evelyn, let me go. Think, if Luca's here, he wants you emotional. He wants me reckless. Don't give him that." She glared at him, eyes wet, breath unsteady. "Then don't make me stand still while my babies cry." He released her. "Stay behind me." Together they climbed the stairs, each creak of the metal steps like a countdown. At the top, a single door waited. Light spilled from beneath it. Adrian raised his gun, nodded once. Then, with one swift kick, he sent the door flying open. The room was dim, lit only by a hanging bulb. On the far side, 3 small chairs. 2 empty, 1 occupied. A child, blindfolded, crying softly. Evelyn's voice broke. "Ethan." She ran forward, but Adrian's arm shot out, stopping her cold. "Don't," he hissed. "It's a trap." From the shadows, slow clapping echoed, lazy, mocking. "Well done, brother." Luca stepped into the light. The resemblance was haunting. The same sharp jawline, same ice-blue eyes. But where Adrian's gaze carried guilt, Luca's burned with madness. "Still the hero, I see," Luca said, grinning. "Still chasing ghosts you should have buried." Adrian's gun never wavered. "Where are the others?" "Safe," Luca said casually. "For now." "Let them go." Luca tilted his head. "You don't get to demand, not after what you did to me. You buried me alive, Adrian. Do you know what it's like to taste dirt in your lungs for 7 days? Adrian's jaw flexed. "I should have left you there." "Oh, but then you wouldn't have this reunion." Luca smirked, lifting his hand. In it, a small silver locket. Evelyn's. "Still keeping souvenirs?" "Brother?" Evelyn froze. "Where did you get that?" "From one of your guards," he said, chuckling. "They didn't scream for long." Adrian took a step forward. "You hurt them and You'll what?" Luca snapped, voice breaking into fury. "Kill me again? You don't get that satisfaction twice." He reached to his side, grabbed a boy by the shoulder, dragging him forward into the light. Evelyn screamed, "No!" The boy's blindfold fell away. Wide blue eyes, trembling lips, terrified. Luca pressed a gun against the child's head. Adrian froze, every muscle locked, gun still trained but useless now. "Now," Luca said, smiling coldly, "let's see how much the great Adrian Moretti loves his family." The room seemed to stop breathing. Evelyn's tears fell soundlessly. Adrian's finger tightened on the trigger, but his hand shook for the first time in his life. Luca leaned closer to the boy's ear, whispering something none of them could hear. Then, click. The safety came off. Luca's smile widened. "Choose, brother, me or him." The world went silent, and then the light bulb above them shattered. The light bulb burst. For an instant, the room plunged into darkness, a chaos of sound and movement. Evelyn screamed. A gun went off, glass shattered. "Step closer!" Luca's voice cut through the smoke. "And the kid dies!" Adrian froze. His son's small silhouette trembled in Luca's grasp. The gun pressed against the boy's temple, his terrified breaths filling the silence. Adrian's own heartbeat drowned out everything else. He raised his hands slowly, gun slipping from his fingers, clattering to the floor. "Let him go," he said, voice calm but deadly. "This is between us, not them." Luca laughed, that same cruel, broken laugh Adrian had once known from childhood, before ambition and blood turned it into something else. "You already died once, brother," Luca sneered. "Let's make it official." Evelyn clutched the twins behind her, every muscle trembling. Her eyes darted between the brothers, one driven by madness, the other by love disguised as violence. "Please," she whispered, but neither heard her. Adrian took a step forward. "Luca," he said softly, "you want revenge? Fine. You'll get it. Just let him go. Always the martyr." Luca pressed the barrel harder into the boy's skin. The child whimpered. "You think your death will make me whole?" "No," Adrian said. "But it might make you stop hurting everyone else." The words struck something deep, a flicker of hesitation. For a heartbeat, the rage faltered. And that was all Adrian needed. He lunged. The gun fired. A deafening roar. Evelyn screamed as both men crashed into the floor, rolling, fists and fury, colliding in a storm of blood and betrayal. The gun slid across the floor, spinning into shadow. Adrian struck first, a brutal blow to Luca's jaw, but his brother countered, knife flashing in the half-light. The blade grazed Adrian's shoulder, drawing a crimson line. "Still think you're the savior?" Luca hissed. "You built a kingdom of corpses, and now you want redemption?" Adrian slammed him against a steel beam, teeth bared. "I built that kingdom to protect her." He didn't see the next attack coming. Luca drove the knife into his side. Adrian gasped, pain white-hot, but he didn't fall. Instead, he grabbed Luca's wrist and twisted, forcing the blade out. "Die already!" Luca roared. "Not before I finish what I started." The sound of more gunfire filled the factory. Adrian's men storming the floor below, shouting orders, exchanging fire with Luca's guards. Evelyn pulled the twins behind a stack of crates, shielding them as dust and bullets filled the air. Her heart beat so hard it hurt. Every sound from the fight above made her flinch. "Stay here," she whispered, voice trembling. "Don't move, no matter what happens." "Mama," one of the boys whimpered, "is Papa going to stop the bad man?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. Upstairs, the brothers' fight raged on. Adrian's strength began to falter, blood dripping from the wound in his side, his breath ragged. Luca's eyes glowed with manic triumph. "You always thought you were better than me," Luca spat. "Father chose you. The Empire chose you. She chose you." He pointed toward Evelyn, hidden below. "But tell me, brother, when she sees what's left of you, will she still love the monster?" Adrian grabbed him by the throat, slamming him against the wall. "She already saw the monster, and she loved me anyway." Luca's grin widened, and in that instant Adrian realized the madness in his brother's eyes wasn't rage. It was pleasure. He wanted to die. He wanted to drag Adrian down with him. The thought came too late. Luca wrenched free and pulled the pin from a grenade hidden beneath his coat. Adrian's blood ran cold. "Luca!" "Goodbye, brother." The explosion tore through the second floor. The blast rocked the entire factory. Flames erupted, metal shrieked, and the ceiling rained debris. Evelyn threw herself over the twins, shielding them as smoke and fire filled the air. "Adrian!" she screamed. "Adrian!" No answer. She rose, coughing, eyes burning, searching through the smoke. Through the haze, she saw two figures. One collapsed, the other gone. Adrian lay bleeding, half buried beneath fallen beams, his face pale, eyes barely open. She stumbled toward him, tears streaking through ash on her cheeks. "Don't you dare die on me again," she whispered, dropping to her knees beside him. Her hands pressed to the wound in his side, hot, wet, and deep. He winced, trying to speak. "Evelyn." "Save your breath," she choked out. "My God, there's so much blood." He smiled faintly, that same broken smirk he'd given her years ago, right before he vanished. "You always hated the mess I made. Stop talking. You came back for me." She pressed harder on the wound, shaking her head. "For them, Adrian. I came for our boys." His eyes softened, pain and pride mixing into one last look. "That's why I knew you'd survive me." "Don't say that." His hand found hers, cold and trembling. "You're stronger than I ever was." "Shut up!" She was sobbing now, the sound breaking her voice. "Don't you dare leave me again!" The flames climbed higher, reflecting in the wet shine of her tears. Adrian's men burst through the doors, shouting orders, pulling debris aside. "Boss!" one yelled. "We've got him! He's alive!" Evelyn looked up, eyes wild. "Help him! Now!" Two of the men lifted Adrian carefully, laying him across a makeshift stretcher. Blood soaked through his shirt, but his grip never left hers. He stared up at her, eyelids fluttering. "There's something I never told you," he murmured. "Save it. We'll talk when you're safe." He shook his head weakly. "No time." Her heart seized. "What are you talking about?" He coughed, blood on his lips. "It wasn't Luca who betrayed us." Her hands froze. "What?" His breathing slowed. "Someone closer." "Adrian who?" He tried to speak again, but the words drowned in a gasp. His eyes rolled back. "Adrian!" she screamed, shaking him. "Don't you dare!" But he was already slipping away, his hand falling limp in hers. Evelyn's cry echoed through the burning factory. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. The night smelled of blood, gunpowder, and loss. Adrian's men rushed to get him into a waiting vehicle. Evelyn followed, face streaked with smoke and tears, clutching the locket she'd found days ago, now cracked and stained with his blood. As the convoy sped into the night, one of the guards answered his phone. His expression changed, pale, frightened. He looked at Evelyn. "Ma'am, the call's coming from inside our network. Someone's feeding them our location." Evelyn's stomach dropped. She turned to Adrian's unconscious body, whispering, "Who betrayed us, Adrian?" But he couldn't answer. And somewhere in the darkness behind them, headlights flared to life, following. The world returned to him in fragments. Pain first, sharp, pulsing, electric. Then the scent of smoke and antiseptic. And finally, her voice, trembling, frayed at the edges. "Adrian, can you hear me?" He blinked, the ceiling swimming into focus. Cracked plaster, dim light. The faint hum of generators outside. He was alive, barely. A hand touched his, small, cold, familiar. Evelyn. She sat beside the bed, her golden hair tangled, eyes red from sleeplessness. She looked like a ghost, his ghost. "The doctor said you almost didn't make it," she whispered. He managed a weak smile. "Almost doesn't count." Her lips quivered. "Don't joke. You lost so much blood. I thought—" He reached up, his fingers brushing her wrist. "You still care." Her breath caught, but she didn't answer. Silence stretched between them, heavy, unspoken words pressing against the air. The past lingered like smoke neither could breathe through. Finally, she said, "You were calling my name when you were bleeding out." "I always do," he murmured. Her gaze hardened. "Stop pretending this is something sacred, Adrian. You lied. You disappeared. You left me to raise 3 children who didn't even know their father's name." He turned his head slightly, grimacing from the pain. "I had to." She laughed, bitter, exhausted. "That's not an explanation. That's a wound you keep opening." He swallowed, the words fighting their way out. "It wasn't Luca who betrayed me, Eve." Her eyes narrowed. "Then who?" Adrian met her gaze, and something inside him cracked. My father. The world seemed to stop. For a moment, Evelyn didn't even breathe. What? Adrian's jaw clenched. Vittorio Moretti ordered your death. Her heart slammed in her chest. That's impossible. He's alive, Adrian said, voice hollow, and he never stopped pulling the strings. Her mind reeled, memories flooding back. The night he vanished, the whispers in the dark, the coded threats that never made sense. Why? She managed to ask. Adrian's eyes darkened. Because he believed you'd destroy the Moretti legacy. He thought love made me weak. Evelyn shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. So you let me think you betrayed me? You let me hate you? He closed his eyes, the pain deeper than any wound. It was the only way to keep you alive. If he believed I'd cast you out, he wouldn't come for you. Her voice cracked. You broke me, Adrian. I broke myself, he said quietly. She rose to her feet, trembling with rage and grief. You don't get to turn that into poetry. You shattered me. And you call it protection. He stared at her, unable to fight back. She was right. Every scar she carried had his name written on it. I thought if you hated me, you'd survive me, he whispered. You'd build a world without my shadows. She laughed through tears. A world? I was hiding in motels, raising your sons, while men hunted me because of your name. Adrian's hand fisted in the sheets. I never wanted them to. Then why didn't you come back sooner? She demanded. You had 3 years, Adrian. 3 years of birthdays, fears, nights when I prayed you were dead just so the pain would stop. His eyes glistened, his voice breaking. Because I didn't think I deserved to see you again. The confession hung between them like smoke. Outside, the wind howled through broken shutters. Inside, the air was too still. A fragile truce built from exhaustion and truth. Evelyn turned away, pressing her palm to the window. I loved you more than I should have, and you made me pay for it. He watched her silhouette against the pale dawn light. If I could undo it, you can't. Silence again. The kind that 1,000 words couldn't fill. Adrian tried to sit up, wincing from the pain. There's more you need to know. She looked over her shoulder, eyes sharp. More? He nodded. My father didn't just order your death. He ordered Luca's betrayal. He orchestrated the entire war. Evelyn froze. The ambush that night. He planned it, Adrian said. He wanted me dead. And you erased. Her pulse quickened. Why? Because I defied him. I married for love, not power. That was my sin. A decade earlier, Adrian, younger, reckless, standing in the Moretti mansion. His father, Vittorio, a man carved from ice, stood at the head of the table. You think she belongs here? Vittorio's voice was calm, but his eyes burned. A woman from nothing? She'll dilute our bloodline, destroy our empire. She's my wife, Adrian said. She's your weakness. I don't need your permission. Vittorio smiled then, cold, lethal. Every son thinks he can outlive his father. None ever do. Back in the present, Adrian's voice trembled with the memory. He told me the only way to keep you safe was to disappear, so I let him believe I betrayed you. I became the monster he said I was. Evelyn's tears fell silently. And you think that excuses you? No, he said. It's just the truth. She stared at him, the pieces of her past rearranging into something unbearable. All those years of hatred, loneliness, and it had all been built on his sacrifice. But it didn't erase the damage. You broke me to protect me, she whispered. That's not love, Adrian. That's cruelty disguised as sacrifice. He looked at her then, not as the Mafia boss, not as the feared Moretti heir, but as a man hollowed out by his own choices. I know, he said softly, and I'd do it again if it meant you'd live. Her heart twisted. She hated that part of her still ached for him. A faint sound came from the hallway. The soft click of a floorboard. Adrian stiffened instantly, his instincts flaring awake. "We're not alone." Evelyn turned toward the door, her pulse spiking. "What?" He gestured for her to stay back, reaching for the pistol on the nightstand. His body trembled from blood loss, but his hand was steady. The air shifted, a cold draft sweeping through the room. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. Evelyn's breath hitched. Adrian aimed at the door. "Show yourself." The handle turned. For a moment, silence swallowed everything. Then a shadow filled the doorway, tall, broad, familiar. Adrian's hand froze mid-air, disbelief cutting through him like a blade. Evelyn's eyes widened. "No." The figure stepped into the light. Vittorio Moretti, alive, composed, the silver in his hair gleaming like a crown of ice. A pistol hung casually in his gloved hand. "Well," Vittorio said, voice smooth, chilling. "The prodigal son survives, and the woman who ruined him still breathes." Adrian's grip tightened on the gun. "You should have stayed buried." Vittorio smiled. "You of all people should know. Monsters don't die that easily." Evelyn moved instinctively in front of Adrian, heart pounding. "You tried to kill me." He regarded her with detached amusement. "I failed once. I won't again." Adrian raised his weapon, but Vittorio was faster. A single gunshot split the air. The bullet shattered the lamp beside Evelyn, plunging the room into darkness. Her scream echoed through the safe house. Adrian fired back, once, twice, flashes lighting the room in bursts of violence and shadow. Then silence. Smoke drifted through the doorway. Vittorio was gone. Evelyn's hands shook. Adrian slumped back against the bed, breathing hard, eyes fixed on the door. "He's not going to stop," he said, voice hoarse. "Not until one of us is dead." Evelyn's tears fell silently. "Then you end it." Adrian's eyes glinted in the dark. The old fire returning, sharper, colder. "This time," he whispered, loading a new magazine, "the war comes home." Outside, the faint sound of an engine rumbled in the night. Vittorio's convoy vanishing into the shadows. The final battle had begun. The storm returned. It wasn't rain this time, but thunder rolling over the black horizon, the same kind of sky that had once witnessed their beginning. The abandoned airfield stretched before them, windswept and empty except for the convoy of black cars idling in the distance. Adrian stood at the center of it, blood still staining his shirt, body weak but will unbroken. Evelyn was beside him, her face pale yet fierce, eyes bright with the fire that had carried her through every betrayal. Behind them, 3 small figures clung to each other, their sons. And across the field, emerging from the storm's shadow, came Vittorio Moretti, old, unyielding, dressed in black. His cane struck the ground with every step, deliberate, echoing, final. "Adrian," he said, voice smooth as poison, "you should have stayed buried." Adrian's gun was already raised. "You should have stayed dead." Vittorio smiled faintly, eyes glinting with something ancient and cruel. "You've brought her back into this world again, the woman who nearly cost me everything." "She's the only thing I ever did right," Adrian said. Evelyn didn't flinch. "You destroyed your own family for power, Vittorio. Don't you dare talk about loss." The older man's gaze shifted to the children. "The heirs. The bloodline must be preserved." Adrian stepped in front of them, jaw tight. "You'll touch them over my dead body." Vittorio's smirk faded. "That can be arranged." He lifted his hand. Dozens of men emerged from the shadows. Guns raised, the air thick with the smell of rain and gun oil. Adrian didn't blink. His own men stepped forward in turn, a silent wall of loyalty and vengeance. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then thunder cracked, and the field erupted into war. Gunfire tore through the night. Bullets sparked off car metal, glass shattered, screams echoed across the tarmac. Adrian moved like a man possessed. Precise, ruthless, his pain forgotten. Every shot he fired was an oath kept, every blow a promise fulfilled. Evelyn, crouched behind a fallen crate, returned fire with shaking hands but steady aim. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was the storm. "Stay down," Adrian shouted, glancing back at her. "I'm done hiding," she yelled back, firing again, and hit her mark. The chaos blurred. Lightning flashed overhead, illuminating a battlefield of shadows and blood. Adrian's men fell one by one, but so did Vittorio's. Then silence, broken only by the wind. Vittorio stood alone, coat torn, blood streaking his temple. His cane was gone, replaced by a pistol trembling in his hand. "You think you've won," he rasped. Adrian stepped forward, gun trained on him. "I didn't come to win. I came to end it." The old man sneered. "You'll always be your father's son." Adrian fired once. The bullet hit clean. Through the heart. Vittorio staggered back, disbelief in his eyes. For the first time in his life, fear lived there. He fell to his knees, whispering something only the storm could hear. Then he was gone. The world didn't roar in victory. It exhaled. Years of blood. Silence and betrayal, finally collapsing into quiet. Evelyn ran to Adrian as his gun dropped from his hand. He swayed, exhausted, and she caught him, holding him close. "It's over," she whispered, voice trembling. He looked down at her, eyes filled with exhaustion and awe. "It was never supposed to end this way. It never does," she said softly. Rain began to fall, gentle this time, not violent. The storm that had haunted them now washed them clean. Days later, sunlight filled the hospital room. The walls were white, the machines steady in their quiet rhythm. Adrian woke slowly, blinking against the light. The first thing he saw was Evelyn, asleep beside him, head resting on the bed's edge. Her hair spilled across his hand like gold thread. The triplets slept nearby, curled together on the couch. Peace, fragile but real. Had found them at last. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Eve. Her eyes opened, tired but warm. "You're awake," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "You stayed." She gave a small, shaky laugh. "You almost died again. I wasn't going to let you finish that habit." He squeezed her hand gently. "You're free now." Her gaze softened. "No, Adrian, we are." He stared at her for a long moment. No lies between them now, no shadows left to hide in. "I used to think love was a weakness," he said quietly, "but I learned something out there." "What?" she asked. He smiled, faint but true. "If love is a war, then you are always worth the battle." Tears glistened in her eyes. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. "I hated you," she whispered, "and I loved you even more." He closed his eyes. "Then maybe we both survived the same wound." Outside the window, dawn painted the sky in soft pinks and golds. For the first time in years, no gunfire echoed, no shadows waited, only silence and possibility. A week later, the family stood at the runway again, but this time there were no guards. No fear, just wind, sunlight, and the hum of a jet waiting to rise. Adrian lifted the boys one by one up the steps, Evelyn following close behind. Inside the cabin, she paused, glancing at him. "You sure about this?" He nodded. "For once in my life." She smiled faintly. "No more running?" He looked out the window at the clouds stretching endlessly ahead. "No, just living." The engines roared to life. Softer this time, not a storm, but a beginning. Evelyn sat beside him, her hand finding his. The boys laughed, pressing their faces to the glass as the ground fell away beneath them. Adrian watched them, then turned to her. "I used to think home was a place," he said quietly. "Turns out, it was always a person." Her throat tightened. Then welcome home. The plane broke through the clouds, sunlight flooding the cabin. Below them, the world stretched wide and new. No bloodlines, no ghosts, no empire, just sky. And for the first time, Adrian Moretti, the man who once ruled through fear, closed his eyes and breathed freely. Miles above the earth, Evelyn leaned back in her seat, watching her sons sleep against their father's arm. Peace looked strange on him. Softer. Human. She smiled faintly, whispering to herself, "We survived the storm." He opened his eyes at her voice, smiled back. Maybe the storm was the only thing that kept us alive long enough to find the calm. Their fingers intertwined, steady, unafraid. Outside, the clouds parted and sunlight streamed through the cabin windows like redemption. For the first time, the world below didn't look dangerous. It looked like a future,